Everything we built was a lie.
I'm Marcus Chen, 45 years old, and I've spent the last 2 decades building one of Houston's most respected architectural firms. My designs are known for pushing boundaries, innovative, uncompromising, much like I've always been as a person. Standing at the unveiling of my latest project, a gleaming 30-story skyscraper that would reshape the Houston skyline, I watched wealthy investors and industry colleagues mingle around me. My assistant handed me champagne, mentioning how impressed everyone was with the building. I barely acknowledged the compliment. Validation stopped mattering to me years ago. My eyes found Howard Prescott in the crowd, the man who'd questioned my unconventional foundation design 6 months earlier, insisting we needed to revise everything. I just learned his own Houston project collapsed during construction, injuring 3 people. I took a measured sip of champagne and told my assistant quietly that I never forget people who doubt me. Ever. My phone vibrated with a call from Rachel, my wife of 16 years. Even after all this time together, seeing her name brought a slight warmth to my otherwise calculated demeanor. She was checking whether I'd make our daughter Emma's dance recital that night. I checked my watch. The performance started in an hour. I promised I'd be there, telling her I never miss what matters. Unlike my own father, who abandoned our family when I was 12, leaving me to care for my dying mother alone, I built my entire life on unshakable reliability. My rules have always been simple. Loyalty above all else, protect what's yours, and never forget those who wrong you. As I drove home to change clothes before the recital, I reflected on how carefully I'd constructed my life. Rachel, with her warm smile and quiet intelligence, had been my complete opposite when we met during graduate school. Where I was calculating, she was spontaneous. Where I was rigid, she flowed like water. Our children, Emma at 16 and Tyler at 21, had been raised with everything I never had: stability, affluence, and unwavering parental support. My phone rang again, this time my friend of 18 years, Derek Morrison. We'd met when I was designing my first major commercial project, and Derek was the ambitious real estate developer who took a chance on me. We'd risen together, becoming each other's closest confidants and business allies. He was confirming our racquetball game the next morning at 6. Despite everything appearing normal, when I arrived home, I noticed small details that had been bothering me lately. Rachel had laid out my favorite tie, one of those small gestures that sustained our marriage. But as I adjusted it in the mirror, a folded receipt fell from my jacket pocket. It was from an upscale downtown hotel I hadn't visited in months, not since meeting a European client there. The detail nagged at me as I drove to Emma's recital. Other things had been off lately, too. Rachel's sudden interest in weekend wellness retreats every other weekend. Her new phone password, those late-night texts she claimed were from her sister Diane. I pushed these thoughts aside as I took my seat in the auditorium. Tyler waved from a few rows ahead, sitting with college friends. I nodded back, proud that my son had followed my path into architecture despite my demanding expectations. Halfway through Emma's performance, my phone vibrated with an urgent message from my site manager about structural issues at our new project. After the recital ended, I kissed Emma's forehead, promised Rachel I'd be home later, and drove to the construction site, completely unaware that the real collapse in my life was imminent. 3 days later, I sat in my home office reviewing blueprints when Rachel came in, dressed for what she called her book club. She mentioned she'd be back around 9, avoiding eye contact. I remarked evenly that this was her 3rd book club meeting that week. Her smile faltered momentarily before she explained they were doing a special series organized by her sister Diane. I simply nodded, watching as she left. After hearing her car pull away, I opened my laptop and checked the tracking app I'd discreetly installed on her phone weeks earlier. After growing increasingly suspicious, I needed to know the truth. The dot on the screen moved steadily, not toward her sister's neighborhood, but downtown toward the hotel district. I closed the laptop, my face impassive despite cold fury building inside me. 20 minutes later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice identified herself as calling from Memorial Hospital. My wife had been in a car accident. The world compressed around me. I asked how severe it was. The woman said Rachel was stable, but asking for me. I drove with mechanical precision, my mind cycling through scenarios and contingencies, my default response when confronting chaos. At the hospital, I moved swiftly through corridors until a nurse at the station stopped me firmly. "Only family allowed," she said. "I'm her husband," I replied, my voice betraying nothing of the adrenaline coursing through me. The nurse checked her chart, her expression shifting with confusion. That's strange. Another man already signed in as her husband. For the first time in decades, I felt my carefully constructed controls slipping. The nurse continued speaking, but her words became distant as I moved past her toward Rachel's room. Inside, I found Derek Morrison holding my wife's hand, their fingers intertwined with the easy familiarity of longtime lovers. Rachel's face drained of color when she saw me in the doorway. Derek started talking, not releasing her hand. "Marcus, we've been trying to find the right time to tell you." I stood perfectly still, absorbing the scene like a photograph I would never forget. My best friend and my wife together. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The hotel receipt I'd found had been Derek's, accidentally transferred to my jacket during our last racquetball game when we'd hung our jackets side by side. The weekend retreats, the late-night texts, the new password on her phone, all of it suddenly made perfect, horrible sense. Without saying a single word, I turned and left, ignoring Rachel's broken call of my name. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, breathing measured despite the roaring in my ears. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the calculated deception from the two people I'd trusted most in this world. For 3 weeks, I went through the motions of life with mechanical precision. I moved into my downtown apartment above my studio, filed for divorce through my attorney, and continued overseeing my projects as if nothing had changed. I answered Tyler's messages with brief reassurances, but ignored Rachel's 27 increasingly desperate calls. On the 28th call, I finally answered. "What could you possibly have to say?" My voice was controlled, almost curious. "Please, Marcus, let me explain. It's not what you think," she pleaded desperately. "I saw exactly what it is. How long has this been going on?" The silence that followed told me everything before she finally whispered, 22 months. Almost 2 years, Tyler's graduation ceremony, my mother's funeral, our anniversary trip to Belize, all built on lies, every moment tainted. "Marcus, please," Rachel continued desperately. "Derek doesn't mean anything to me. It was a mistake." "No," I interrupted, my voice now tinged with something that made her fall completely silent. "A mistake is something you do once. You made thousands of deliberate choices to betray me. Every lie, every night you snuck away, every message you sent him, every time you looked me in the eye and deceived me. You chose this." She tried asking about the kids, whether we could at least talk about them. I cut her off. "Tyler is an adult. Emma is old enough to understand betrayal. I'll see you at the divorce proceedings." As I ended the call, I didn't feel rage or heartbreak. Instead, a familiar cold clarity settled over me. The same feeling I'd had at 12 when I realized my father wasn't coming back. The same resolve that carried me through building my company when early investors abandoned me after my first failed project. Betrayal doesn't break Marcus Chen. It crystallizes him into something harder, something unforgiving. The family home I'd designed myself now felt like a mausoleum of lies. I went there to collect personal items while Rachel was out. Footsteps on the stairs revealed Tyler, home from graduate school for the weekend. "Dad," he said, his expression caught between anger and relief. "You finally showed up." I told him I was just there for my things. "That's it?" he asked incredulously. "After 16 years of marriage, you're just walking away? Mom's devastated." I asked calmly if that's what she told him. Tyler stepped closer, explaining that she'd admitted the affair with Derek, and yes, it was messed up. But families work through things. They talk. They don't just vanish. I asked if she'd mentioned it had been going on for 22 months, watching the information land on Tyler's face like a physical blow. He faltered, doing the math in his head. 2 years? But that means during my graduation. Yes, I confirmed simply. The doorbell interrupted us. I opened it to find Emma, tears streaming down her face, her dance bag slung over her shoulder. "I hate her," she said, pushing past me into the house. "I hate them both." I closed the door and asked what happened. Emma's voice was tight with fury as she explained she'd gone to Derek's office to surprise him. He'd promised to help with her college applications. His assistant said he was meeting with Mom, so Emma waited. When they came out together, they were kissing like it was normal, like they weren't destroying everything our family had built. Tyler sank onto the stairs, head in his hands. I placed a steady hand on Emma's shoulder and told them both something they needed to understand. My tone left no room for dispute. What happens next isn't about reconciliation. It's not about forgiveness. I don't forgive betrayal. Not from anyone. Tyler asked if I was just done with Mom after everything. I replied that their mother made her choice when she started this affair. Derek made his choice too. Now I'm making mine, I said. Tyler wanted to know what that meant. I told him simply that he and Emma would see exactly what it meant in the coming weeks and months. Later that evening, I sat in my downtown office when Raymond Gallo, my head of security, and one of the few people I genuinely trusted, entered with a thick file. "You were right," he said, placing it on my desk. Inside were financials, communications, and hotel records, everything documented in black and white. I asked about properties. Raymond confirmed 3 undershell companies, one in Aspen, one in the Bahamas, and one by the lake. Derek had been preparing for quite a while, setting up his escape route. He always said I taught him to have contingency plans, I observed coldly. Yet he wasn't smart enough to hide his activities from his own company's security systems. Raymond asked what the play was: legal route, public scandal, or financial takedown. I walked to the window overlooking the Houston skyline. The building directly across housed Derek's company headquarters, close enough that I could see the executive offices lit up in the darkness. People like Derek and Rachel think betrayal is just an inconvenient chapter, I said quietly. Something you acknowledge, apologize for, then move past. I'm going to show them it's the whole story, the beginning, middle, and end. Raymond had worked with me long enough to recognize the resolve in my voice. He asked how far we were taking this. "All the way," I replied without hesitation. "First step is information. I want everything. Who else knows about their affair? Who helped them hide it? What they've planned for their future together? Then I want options." "Options for what?" Raymond asked carefully. My smile was barely perceptible. "For making them understand the true meaning of consequence." By midnight, I had formulated the complete framework of my response. It wouldn't be emotional. It wouldn't be rushed. It would be methodical deconstruction. The same process I applied to rebuilding structurally compromised buildings. Identify the weaknesses, remove the damaged elements, rebuild something stronger on the ruins. 5 weeks after the hospital revelation, I sat across from my lawyer, Nora Harrington, in her sleek downtown office. She slid divorce papers toward me with manicured fingers, explaining they were offering a clean 50-50 split on all assets acquired during marriage. I didn't touch the papers, asking if she'd advised them that was unacceptable. Nora's lips quirked as she confirmed she'd informed them of the prenuptial terms. My separate property remained separate, including company shares and intellectual property. I asked about Derek's company. She hesitated, explaining it wasn't technically part of divorce proceedings, but Rachel's attorney mentioned they'd appreciate my discretion regarding the relationship. They wanted my silence about the affair. Nora confirmed they'd indicated willingness to provide substantial additional compensation for a non-disclosure agreement. I finally took the papers, scanning the terms with practiced efficiency. "They're afraid," I observed. "As they should be," Nora replied. She'd represented me for 15 years and knew my methodical nature well. She asked about my counteroffer. I told her to accept the prenup enforcement but decline the NDA request entirely. I wanted full custody of Emma until she turned 18. Nora made notes, warning that Rachel wouldn't agree to full custody. She was the mother, after all, and courts typically favored joint custody arrangements. "She's also the adulterer who betrayed her family with her husband's best friend," I countered calmly. "I have documentation of her absences during key events in Emma's life over the past 2 years, due to her appointments with Derek." Nora asked about documentation. I slid a flash drive across the desk containing calendar entries, security footage from our home system showing Rachel leaving before and returning after multiple school functions, therapy appointments, and family events, plus written testimony from Emma herself about her mother's absences. Nora pocketed the drive, warning this would get extremely ugly. "It already is," I replied, standing to leave. I added one more thing. I wanted forensic accounting of all household expenses for the past 3 years. Every credit card, every bank account, everything. When Nora asked if I was looking for something specific, I paused at the door. "Just confirming what I already know," I said. Meanwhile, across town, Derek paced his penthouse office as his financial advisor delivered unwelcome news. 3 major investors had pulled out of his Riverwalk project, citing concerns about company stability. Derek stopped pacing, demanding to know which investors. The advisor listed Matsuda Group, Wellington Partners, and Crown Holdings, all clients Derek had originally obtained through my connections years ago. The timing wasn't coincidental. He's starting, Derek muttered, then turned to his advisor with urgent instructions to move liquid assets to offshore accounts and accelerate merger discussions with Barrick Construction. His advisor protested that their offer undervalued them by at least 30%. Just do it, Derek snapped, and get me whatever leverage you can find on Marcus Chen. That evening, I visited Emma at Diane's house, where she'd been staying since the revelation. I found her in the guest room, surrounded by textbooks and study materials. I asked how physics was coming along. She looked up, eyes so like my own lighting with relief at my presence. She said she hated it, but was maintaining her 4.0 grade average. That's my girl, I said, sitting on the bed's edge. I told her I'd filed for custody. Emma nodded approvingly, saying she'd already told her mother she wanted to live with me. I warned it might get complicated. Legal proceedings usually do. Emma's voice turned bitter as she explained that Mom was already trying to paint me as absent, workaholic, emotionally unavailable, as if that somehow justified what she did. I studied my daughter, noting the hardness that had crept into her expression over recent weeks. I told her not to let their actions change who she was fundamentally. Why not? She challenged. You're changing. I've never seen you like this before. I corrected her gently. I wasn't changing. I was revealing who I'd always been underneath. Later that night, I met Raymond at a nondescript bar on the city's edge, far from our usual haunts where we might be recognized. We've got something significant, Raymond said, sliding a folder across the table. Derek's company wasn't just in financial trouble. He'd been moving money through shell corporations, then funneling it back to personal accounts. I opened the folder to find bank statements and transaction records spanning 2 years. Money laundering? I asked. It looked like it, Raymond confirmed, and there was more. Did I remember the contractor who died on Derek's Houston project last year? The one officially ruled an accident? Miguel Santos, scaffolding collapse. Raymond nodded grimly, explaining he'd found emails suggesting Derek knew about safety violations, but deliberately concealed them to avoid construction delays that would have cost him millions. I absorbed this information with cold calculation, then asked about Rachel. She'd been moving money too, Raymond confirmed, small amounts from personal accounts to a separate bank entirely, starting about 18 months ago. Their exit strategy, I surmised, planning their new life together for when they finally told me the truth. Raymond hesitated before adding, there was one more thing, my son Tyler. My eyes snapped up sharply. Tyler had met with Derek yesterday at a private room in Capitol Grill, stayed over an hour. For the first time, genuine emotion flickered across my face. I told Raymond to get me the security footage from that meeting. The next morning, I stood in an upscale boutique in downtown Houston, examining a display of expensive watches. The store owner, Gloria, a woman in her 50s, approached with professional warmth. She'd known me for 20 years, since I designed her first storefront. I indicated a particular timepiece, explaining it was for my son. As Gloria retrieved the watch, she hesitated, mentioning she thought she'd seen Tyler last week with Derek, looking at this exact model. My expression remained completely neutral. Is that so? Yes, she confirmed. Derek had purchased it for him, said it was a graduation gift. I examined the $15,000 Patek Philippe carefully and told her I'd take the same one, have it engraved with a personal message. When Gloria returned with the wrap package, I thanked her and added casually that in our 20 years of knowing each other, I'd never given her reason to doubt my word. She confirmed this, looking confused about where this was going. I told her Derek Morrison was not who she thought he was, and I'd strongly advise reconsidering any business arrangements with him. Gloria's expression shifted with concern. Her lease renewal with his company was next month. Perhaps you should diversify your options, I suggested mildly before leaving. Across town, Rachel sat in her attorney's office, her composure cracking as she reviewed the latest divorce filing. He wants full custody, she said, stricken. He can't do that. Her attorney, Diane, adjusted her glasses and explained frankly that my substantial documentation of Rachel's absences during important events in Emma's life made the case considerably stronger than they'd like. Rachel protested that didn't make her a bad mother. No, Diane agreed, but it made my case very strong. Additionally, I'd submitted records showing Rachel transferring significant funds to separate accounts over the past year and a half. The court might view this as preparation to abandon family obligations entirely. Rachel paled, insisting those were just savings for emergencies. $342,000 in emergencies? Diane's tone was deeply skeptical. She explained I was building a methodical case, not acting emotionally at all, systematically dismantling Rachel's position piece by piece, like one of my architectural deconstructions. That evening, I received a text from Tyler asking to meet at my apartment. When my son arrived, I immediately noticed the Patek Philippe on his wrist. "Nice watch," I remarked casually, pouring us both whiskey. Tyler glanced down, then met my eyes. Derek gave it to him. "I know," I said, handing him a glass. "Gloria told me." Tyler took a long sip, then admitted he'd met with Derek. I told him I knew that too. Derek had offered Tyler a position at his company, said with the right guidance, Tyler could run his own division within 5 years. Tyler's voice was tight as he added that Derek also said I was planning to destroy him completely, that I was becoming unhinged with revenge. I studied my son carefully, seeing the conflict in his eyes, and asked what he thought about all this. Tyler struggled with his answer. He thought Derek betrayed me terribly, but Derek had also always supported his career, even when I pushed him harder than he thought he could take. "So he was considering Derek's offer?" I asked. Tyler's silence was answer enough. I moved to a drawer and removed a small box, placing it on the table between us. Inside was an identical watch, engraved, "Integrity is the only true legacy. Dad." I told Tyler quietly that Derek wasn't offering him a career. He was buying an alliance against me. Derek knew I was vulnerable where Tyler and Emma were concerned and was exploiting that. Tyler asked what I was going to do to Derek. I replied that the question wasn't what I'd do, but what Derek had already done to himself. "Ask him about Miguel Santos," I said. "Who?" Tyler asked, confused. "The contractor who died on his Houston site last year. Ask him if the safety violations were worth saving 2 weeks of construction time." Tyler's expression shifted with growing understanding. I told him to choose his loyalty carefully, because I never forget those who stand against me, even if they're my own blood. The next day I met with Olivia Mitchell, Derek's ex-wife, at her ranch outside the city. A former competitive equestrian, Olivia had largely withdrawn from society after their contentious divorce 5 years earlier. She was surprised I'd called, noting that she and Rachel weren't exactly friends. I told her I wasn't there about Rachel. I needed information on Derek's foreign accounts, specifically the ones he hid during their divorce. Olivia's eyes widened slightly, asking how I knew about those hidden accounts. I explained the same way I knew he leveraged his relationship with Judge Weston for a favorable settlement, the same way I knew about safety cover-ups, money laundering, and bribery of city officials for expedited building permits. She set her glass down, asking what exactly I was planning. "Justice," I said simply. "With your help or without it." Olivia studied me carefully, then stood and walked to a bookshelf. She removed a false panel and extracted a flash drive, explaining her attorney found these accounts too late to include in the divorce settlement. Derek didn't know she had this information. She'd been saving it for the right moment. "I believe that moment has arrived," she said, handing me the drive. 6 months after the hospital revelation, I stood in the courtroom as the judge delivered her custody ruling. Beside me sat Emma, now 17, her face impassive in a way that reminded me painfully of myself at that age. The court granted primary physical custody to me with supervised visitation rights to Rachel, continuing until Emma reached 18, at which point she could decide her own visitation schedule. Across the aisle, Rachel pressed tissue to her eyes. Derek wasn't present. Their relationship had become increasingly strained as my methodical dismantling of their lives progressed relentlessly. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. The case had become headline news after documents regarding Derek's business practices mysteriously leaked to major media outlets. Safety violations, financial improprieties, laundered money all splashed across business pages and evening news broadcasts. I guided Emma through the crowd without comment, ignoring shouted questions from reporters. In my car, Emma asked if I'd leaked those documents about Mom and Derek. I started the engine, asking if it would matter. "No," she admitted honestly. "They're true, aren't they?" I replied that truth was the one thing I'd never compromised on. Not with her, not with Tyler, not with anyone. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected visitor, Diane Carlton, Rachel's sister. She approached my desk with evident discomfort, not thinking I'd agree to see her. I replied we'd known each other 20 years. She was still family to my children, regardless of what happened. Diane explained why she'd come. Rachel was spiraling badly. The custody decision, financial investigations, Derek pulling away from her. She was talking about moving abroad, starting over completely. Her choice, I said without inflection. Diane asked if I wanted the kids to lose their mother entirely. I explained what Rachel and Derek never grasped. When you tear down a foundation, you can't simply rebuild it and expect the structure to stand as before. Diane argued this wasn't about buildings, but people. About family. Exactly, I agreed. And family requires loyalty above all. Rachel shattered that fundamental requirement. Now she's facing the reality she created through her own choices. That evening, I gave Derek a choice at the Metropolitan Club. Confession or destruction, I said calmly across the private dining table. Full disclosure of all illegal activities, return of embezzled funds, voluntary surrender to authorities, or complete financial and personal annihilation. Derek argued desperately that if I had enough evidence for prosecution, he'd already be charged. Some evidence requires proper context to be admissible in court, I explained. Context I'm prepared to provide unless you take responsibility yourself. I told him Miguel Santos had 3 children whose father died because Derek prioritized profit over safety. His widow was struggling to keep their home. Derek had until tomorrow morning to decide. The next day, Derek held a press conference. I stood at the back of the crowd as he admitted the allegations were true. He directed concealment of safety violations that contributed to Miguel Santos's death, authorized illegal financial transactions, and engaged in tax evasion. He was taking full responsibility and surrendering to authorities that afternoon. He specifically stated that Rachel had no knowledge of his illegal business activities. After the press conference, Derek spotted me in the crowd. Our eyes met briefly, his resigned and defeated, mine unreadable. That evening, I visited Miguel Santos's widow, Elena, at her modest home. I told her there would be a settlement offer coming, a trust for her children's education, and her house paid in full. But why? She asked, confused. You didn't cause Miguel's death? No, I agreed. But I helped expose the truth. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about restoration where possible. 1 year after the hospital revelation, I stood in my newest building's observation deck overlooking the city. Tyler arrived, mentioning Derek's sentencing was tomorrow, 5 to 7 years, according to news reports. I replied it was justice for Miguel Santos and the others hurt by Derek's actions. Tyler revealed Rachel was moving to California, saying there was nothing left for her here except memories of what she destroyed. I showed no reaction. Emma, now 18, had decided she might see her mother over holidays, but was focused on starting college at MIT. Tyler hesitated, then said he'd decided to accept Stanford's offer instead of Cornell. Where your mother will be living, I observed. Yes, he confirmed. I'm not choosing sides. That's what you never understood, Dad. Healing broken things doesn't always mean destroying those who broke them. I was silent for a long moment, then told Tyler about my own father abandoning us when my mother got sick with terminal cancer. He returned years later wanting to reconcile, talking about forgiveness and second chances. What did you do? Tyler asked quietly. I told him exactly what I later told your mother, that some choices are permanent. Some betrayals can't be undone. He died 3 years later, alone. I didn't attend the funeral. Tyler absorbed this painful history. So that's it? The pattern just repeats forever? I placed a hand on his shoulder. Go to Stanford. Maintain your relationship with your mother. But remember what happened, why it happened, and protect yourself accordingly. Tyler asked if that was forgiveness. No, I replied honestly. It's acceptance. Recognition that her relationship with you is separate from her betrayal of me. Then my phone rang with devastating news. Emma had been in a serious car accident on the highway. At the hospital, I found Rachel already there, tear-streaked and terrified. The surgeon explained Emma was out of surgery, but there was spinal trauma. They wouldn't know the full extent until she regained consciousness, which could take hours or days. For Emma's sake, Rachel and I maintained a careful truce over the following 3 weeks, never overlapping except for doctor consultations, communicating through Tyler or texts rather than directly. Emma would eventually recover, though months of physical therapy would be necessary for the spinal injury. 3 months later, I received a handwritten letter from Rachel at my office. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She knew me well enough to understand it wasn't possible. What she was asking was simpler. Let our children love both parents without feeling they were betraying one to love the other. Parker struggled with this daily, she wrote. Brooke pretended she didn't, but she did too. Rachel was establishing her new life far from mine, as I wanted. She wouldn't interfere with my relationship with our children or seek anything more than what she had now. The man she married valued truth above all, she wrote. So here was hers. What she did was unforgivable, but our children shouldn't pay the price for her betrayal forever. I folded the letter and placed it in my desk drawer without responding. But when I called Emma at college that evening, I asked about her mother's calls after we'd discussed her classes and physical therapy progress. Emma was genuinely surprised. Are you actually asking about Mom? I'm asking about your relationship with her, I clarified. It's important you maintain it. A long silence followed. Who are you and what have you done with Marcus Chen? Emma asked, half joking. Later, I texted Tyler about having dinner when I visited Stanford for an architectural symposium. Just us, or he replied carefully. I hesitated only briefly before typing back. Your choice. It wasn't forgiveness. I would never forgive what Rachel and Derek did. The systematic betrayal, the calculated deception, the destruction of everything I'd built. The betrayal remained a permanent fracture in the foundation of my life, something that could not be repaired, only built around carefully. Forgiveness wasn't in my nature. Never had been. Never would be. But for my children's sake, perhaps a cold acceptance could exist alongside my unforgiving memory. Like the buildings I designed, life could be reconstructed after catastrophic damage. Not the same as before, never the same, but perhaps strong enough to withstand whatever storms still lay ahead. I'd shown my children that loyalty matters absolutely, and betrayal has permanent consequences. Some relationships can't be rebuilt no matter how much time passes. But new structures, different structures, could be built on the ruins of what was destroyed. That was enough. It had to be enough.